Okay, right, we got to talk. So I went to this a few days ago. I had a bit of like dental surgery, so I couldn't speak. It was completely incoherent, even more than normal. But we got to talk about Figma, and config was a few days ago, and I'm baffled at the response to it because just a week or so ago, everyone collectively lost their shit at the idea that Adobe had done a surreptitious change to their terms of services, which meant technically, although they aren't, um, they could train AI bullshit from your work, which is not what they're actually doing. They've been quite as legalese, and they're terrible companies. It's not a defense of Adobe. Adobe are awful. However, that's the reality of it. And then at config, we get the AI announcement, and I'm not like this big anti AI person. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not like, oh my god, it's going to steal your job. It's not going to steal your job. These are just shit tools to do shit things. And the reason why I don't care as much with the Adobe thing, I don't personally use any Adobe software at the moment anyway, but I've always been on the side of like, if you use Adobe and you're comfortable with it and you need the tools, just stay there. It's fine. They're a terrible company, but tools is tools. Um, and yeah, you're supporting a bad company, but this in some ways is worse for some really key reasons. So, my main job is I'm a product designer, right? Obviously, a bunch of development, but primarily, keep my phone in the background. Primarily, I design software. Um, and my tool for the last X number of years has been predominantly for this Figma, right? A good reason why also I'm not using any Adobe tools. I do a lot of this stuff in Figma. And two things about this which I hate is, first off, they're training it they're training it on your shit. It's an opt out by default. The generating designs aspect of it is the bit that absolutely boils my piss. The idea of having it rename layers for you automatically, I think, is really useful. And just to make clear my stance on AI as a whole, is I think most generative AI is rubbish and stupid, and most will fall by the wayside when this sort of bubble bursts. And what will remain after that point will be a lot of utilities, things that actually are quite useful. They're not revolutionary, not that sexy, but they are really, really, really helpful. And these tools exist already; they're out there. So things like automatically renaming files, layers inside files, is a very responsible and very useful thing to have. Having the tool that suggests auto layouts for you instead of you fumbling around to work them out, that's useful and a very welcome addition. But when it comes to prompts to generate interfaces, is where I draw a line, because in reality, if you're a working professional UI or UX person, it's not really that useful. It's useful if you're a junior, but in reality, that's not what this is for. As a statement of intent from Figma, being that compared to Adobe, they're the kind of tool which is used by many more people inside the business unit, right? You've got product managers, you've got developers, you've got various other people within business, even marketing teams using it for graphics or using FigJam, or soon Figma Slides, which is again a very cool feature, really overdue. I like the idea of it. I've done decks in Figma for years now. Um, it's good stuff, but that's the thing. Unlike Adobe software, Illustrator, Photoshop, etc., they're still specialist tools fundamentally, right? XD failed, didn't have the market penetration to continue, whatever. Plus the fact they tried to buy Figma and it fell through. That tool doesn't exist anymore. That's just how it is. But Photoshop and Illustrator are still specialist tools. They have a higher barrier to entry than Figma. And it's not an elitist thing. It's just the facts of it, right? They're just harder tools to get into. So there's only so much you can disrupt that market. And adding the AI stuff, although Adobe have been, again, very mild praise of a terrible company, have been relatively responsible with their approach to only training on data from Adobe stock, which is over 10 years old at this point. I still don't like it. I still don't like the generative AI stuff. But the real use for a tool to make a prototype automatically, or to generate a design automatically, doesn't serve you, the actual primary person who this software is for. I mean, because it's for everyone now, right? It's not just for you, the UX or UI person. It's a tool for the product managers, it's a tool for the developers, it's a tool for marketing. Figma's in a broader scope of users. These tools mostly serve for them to generate things on your behalf. to further minimize you in this process. And I'm, again, not of the mindset where, and this is a contentious thing, being my design background, is a lot of designers have this attitude of them wanting to be at the center of every process and being very gatekeepery. I don't personally believe that, and I don't super like that assertion. I'm not like that. However, certain things are better done by certain people, right? I don't think designers should be the filter through which all work passes necessarily. Some processes can happen outside of that, and Figma's done a very good job of the last few years demonstrating that. But this is the thing where these tools are not supporting tools. They directly sit in your workflow, and all it will really serve to be is removing jobs from juniors who could have been there before, who will learn and become tomorrow's seniors, because that's how that works. You remove the lower end of the business, the next generation of the upper end doesn't exist, and the technology and the skill set atrophies. It happens. It's not happened recently, but things are changing at the moment. You think 35, 40 years ago, there's a bunch of R developers and people writing COBOL and stuff like that, these old programming languages, or working in punch card systems, or people who used to have jobs operating fax machines and photocopiers. It sounds really stupid, but around these industries, there's a lot of job roles, and there's a lot of people, a lot of talent, in all the peripheral things that come. I mean, basically, if you boil our job down to basically design the front end of a piece of software, it's one piece of a puzzle. When these jobs get disrupted, either they don't have a use anymore and they just vanish, or in a lot of the cases, there's not enough work incoming at the bottom end of the funnel in cases like languages and the coding side of things like R, COBOL, stuff like that. Fortran, these systems still exist. They still have lots of developers. They get paid an absolute fortune because there's like 4 of them. And part of the reason for that is not just because there's better things now and things have moved on. That is one part of it. The other half is, in that same time when things have moved, the first people to be affected are at the lower end of the scale, and eventually they get it, and these things just die. It's not a one-to-one comparison. It's just a rough thing, and that's what it's for. It's for a product manager to turn up and say, "Here's what I want, make it." And obviously, this is a very limited utility to you, but it's an awful lot of utility to them. And I'm not saying that's necessarily right or wrong. I'm saying it's bad for you. I'm not saying it was bad or good long term. I think, well, I hate generators because it's derivative crap that it generates. It's just nonsense sellotape together. But it's not for you. And the idea that you're not going to be using automatic creation of prototypes, that's not going to be a thing, because that's not going to work properly. It's not in the remit of AI, nor will it ever be, for the way ML works now, to be able to make decisions that has no context, no broader context of intent or methodology, or be able to take in other. It can't consider things. There's no thought process. There's no intelligence there. It's a pattern matcher. It's a predictor. It just sellotapes the net. It's basically autocomplete from your phone on steroids. That's literally how it works. It can't ever make a good prototype. It can probably make a facsimile of an existing prototype, which might work in a lot of cases because how standardized and homogenized designs become recently. Another thing that I don't super love, but whatever, different thing. I don't think you should be supporting Figma. And you can obviously do what you want. It's absolutely fine. I'm not going to be anymore. If I work at a company where it's required for me to use Figma, I totally will. But for my personal work, I'm going to be going back to Sketch, and it's been a long time. It's the second part of this video. I've not used Sketch in years, like everyone else. When Figma came around and we saw that it worked in a browser and you had real-time collaboration, I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool. Oh, it's a bit janky, a bit rough on the edges, but I like this thing. Okay, cool." And then before you know it, you just switched, and it's overtaken, whatever. And it's left the conversation. And I've been on a bit of a journey recently of realizing that the popular thing isn't necessarily the best thing, or old thing that isn't very sexy doesn't mean it's bad because it's not the new fancy thing. And we all fall down this little trap of like, oh, it's newer and shinier, therefore previous thing might suck. Not necessarily. So I'm moving all my personal work back over to Sketch. because there's not very many options out there. You've got Framer and Webflow. They both failed and became no code website builders, right? Webflow wasn't, but yeah, Framer was originally a UX tool. Now it's basically for building websites, and it's not very good at it. You've got Axure. What's the other one? Flinto, which no one ever uses. Axure's okay. Between Figma and ProtoPie, you don't really need Axure anymore. You know, stuff like this. There's not many options out there. There's Penpot, which is like the open source equivalent to Figma. Penpot's a really cool project. It's so far from done, which kind of leaves only one real viable alternative, and that is Sketch. And the thing is, again, I've not used Sketch. I mean, I think my license for it ran out in like 2018. I've not used it since then, which feels like a couple of weeks ago, but actually that's like over 5 years. God, I'm old. But yeah, Sketch is pretty good. Some things have changed. You have real-time collaboration now, right? The same as in Figma. You have the whole online doc storage thing. Although actually, I'm quite enjoying keeping my docs local. It's kind of nice being able to have files, right? I'm in the process of pulling down all my Figma files and converting them to Sketch, because Sketch also opens Figma files. Because I'm not leaving my files in Figma for them to. I've got like 50, 60, 70, whatever projects on there that I don't want. I don't want Figma training their AI on, so I'm taking them all off. Unless they've done it already, who knows? But anyway, Sketch is pretty good. Basically, the long short of it is it has it has the same collaboration stuff that Figma's got. The desktop application is still only Mac only. In terms of day in, day out, so far, all I've been doing so far as a personal project I've been working on, I'm moving it forward in Sketch. There's a few niceties inside the UI. So some things work quicker, like for example, changing radiuses directly on the shape by having these be sliders. It's the interface is a little bit quicker to navigate, because it's all the same stuff. You now use Figma, you can use Sketch, and vice versa. There's obviously minor differences, but the workflow's identical. Figma's workflow was a direct copy of Sketch's, after all. Yeah, so far I'm really liking it. You can do other stuff as well, where, for example, this is going to blow your mind. Check this out. Let's do this. Oh my gosh, just make one. Let's make that one 3. Make that one, I don't know. Wow, double double strokes on shapes. Something that hasn't been in Figma that everyone's been asking for decades. So yeah, the handover tools are worse. You have commenting, you have real-time collaboration. The way Sketch deals with symbols, what a rectangle, why not? I've always preferred their equivalent of components, where you have I still do this in Figma as well. I have a separate page where my components live, but here also you have this gallery for your symbols and also your text style. So it builds like a little miniature sort of like story block type thing in line, which is very cool. It's quite nice. Yeah, the way overrides work is pretty good. The overrides are actually better than the overrides in Figma, I'd say. It's a lot more flexible, but things you do lose. Sketch symbols don't have variants. You do have like color variables, but you don't have a variable system as such. I think they used to be. I've not delved into plugins yet. There used to be a bunch of plugins that do it. That's another thing as well as Sketch plugins. From what this is from memory, more from use. Sketch plugins are way better than Figma add-ons are kind of, we've used them, most of them kind of suck, right? They're very sandboxed. You have much better developer tools in Sketch. Some other fun things is this guy here, assistance, which ignore this button, but has command line tools. So if you're a developer, you have basically a bunch of API options to run through validations based on files without having to worry. So even you can do this with Figma as well, but it's just a little bit nicer having it being local rather than having to interact with the web API. The other big thing is performance. I can't show you in this file because it's just got a rectangle in it, but yeah, Sketch is a native app, which means it runs like it's a native app. It's fast. It's really fast, and there's no file size limit. So I used to work on a lot of desktop software where you have so many permutations of an application. So I would hit the memory limit in Figma frequently. I have to break up files quite a lot. It's a real thing. It's really annoying. no such problem here. Sketch is stupidly performant. In fact, actually, there's if you know Django, if you remember that guy, you remember that guy. Let's go with Django, the guys who make the iStat menu, but also this mythical application called Scala, which hasn't come out still. Which is like they were. This is around the time Figma became a thing. They were like, we're going to be building our own UI app to challenge Sketch. And he wrote a bunch of articles, and the article is always very interesting. One of the articles recently is about memory usage inside applications, and I'm going to link to this if I remember. But basically, if you look at these graphs, the interesting thing here is see the orange one is always Sketch, and all of these graphs, the green one is Figma, the orange one is Sketch, and you see in almost all these graphs, Figma's at the top and Sketch is at the bottom. It gives you an idea of what this is a guideline, but it gives you an idea of what the performance difference is like between Sketch and Figma. Sketch is fast, and it's very nice having a native desktop app as well. There are some frustrations. There are some teething things. There's a few things that I miss. But overall, for personal stuff, and a big caveat of you using Sketch instead of Figma is if you're working in projects, I'm freelance at the moment, so I'm working a mixture of personal projects and projects that I am in control of. Normally, I don't walk into a business and it's normally if I'm starting something from scratch, right? I'm that kind of guy. I'm not like a sit on a existing team kind of person. So I can dictate to an extent how this is built. So I can choose to use Sketch. Not that's not an option for everyone. For everyone, but for personal work, I would recommend doing so, or Penpot even if you can get away with it, because it's shockingly close. And this weird, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well. This weird thing of saying this tool is completely obsolete because of Figma, and that's just not true. It's really close, and as if most of the stuff that you can't do, and I'm gonna lay it. I'm gonna be very candid for a second. Lay it down. Where I'm also a developer and not just a designer, and I can code. Um, I don't actually, for unless I can get away with it, or working with companies where I need to do it, I don't build prototypes very often. I don't need to. I don't need to worry about auto layouts as often as probably a lot of other people do because I don't need to. The thing I do is I have the outlines of I have state-based drawings of the things that I need, just to outline them instead of going through all the hand wringing of futzing with auto layouts, which is still kind of a slightly bad metaphor for CSS, right? I just write the CSS and I write the markup and I do the thing, and I can work faster because it's a system with a higher barrier to entry, but actually less annoying to work with day in day out. The ideas of having changes and variables and stuff, that's just core. That's central to development, right? They're not exotic concepts and not very hard to implement. In fact, they're a lot easier to implement outside of Figma in code than within Figma. So I just don't do that step because I don't need to. Right? I can just do it in a real browser. So I think those my caveats are. This makes an awful lot of sense to use as a personal tool. Your skills won't atrophy inside Figma. It's not, if you, these are just tools, right? They're not that hard. Your work is not the tools you use. Your work is your mind. Your work is your ability to solve problems. The tool is a tool, right? And without that tool, if you can't use another tool, then it's a tool. Don't sweat it. It's fine. It doesn't actually hold you up that much. So the caveat would be if you can decide to, if you have the option, and yeah, you can just ignore the AI stuff. But I don't know, man. Figma's file management absolutely sucks ass. It's expensive. Like the way it manages teams is really annoying. The way it does history can be really really annoying. Dev mode just doesn't work. Let's be real. It's not very useful. Your mileage may vary. I find it kind of useless. You get like the whole thing with like you become so enamored with the features you've got. I see this so often with so many designers where they spend so many things going like, oh my god, my mind's been blown by like interactive, like the thing where they had prototypes that could be self interact, right? I have to link to one of the frames. It's like, oh my god, I have to redo my entire thing to make use of this feature. Like, no, you don't. Like, what do you like? No, you don't. Not necessarily. And it's one of those things where the tail started wagging the dog a little bit with Figma, where I've heard lots of like UI people unironically say, "Well, can't the website just be based on the Figma? Why do you need the developers?" Like, seriously, I've heard them say this. Like, you don't have to do the development step. That can be the Figma file can power the entire experience. Like, no, it can't. That's not how this works. If you've got a complex application, you have Figma is a metaphor. It's a representation of a more, it's a simplified representation of a more complex process. And there's more steps that go into the outside of it to make these things work. It trivializes certain steps on purpose. And the thing is not so much about like, oh well, why are they making it so no, it doesn't work like that. The point is when you hand off complexity, you lose flexibility, right? And if you are the designer and you're saying system has to be flexible in XYZ way, and you find a way to represent that in something like Figma, the thing that comes off the shelf, the thing that you're using to make that thing exist, has chosen the methodology for it, right? And every time you fight against Figma to make it do something it's not supposed to do, in the world of code, that's not a thing, because you can make the thing do the thing all the time because it's a lower level tool with a higher barrier to entry. But what you gain in exchange is flexibility, and that's what this means. Like, that's why these things don't work this way. The more convenient something is, generally, the less flexible it is. That's why Nuke, the compositing software, is not as easy to use as After Effects. It can do more. That's or like that's why Paint isn't as good as Photoshop, because Paint's easier. It's not quite as simple as that, but you see what I'm saying. Like, you hand off some of that complexity. And it's like they're just tools. It's basically your end result and your end handover, your end deliverable in most of these cases is pictures most of the time. The markup from dev mode and Figma is kind of useless. This is no better. I'm not saying it's any better for that. You're still eventually making drawings. Lots of them, lots of tools to make it easier, but focus less on the tools. There's a lot. And if you're in a business of a certain size, this again, the big caveat is here. If you're working in a very small business, this is totally feasible. I'm not trying to suggest that a lot of the things, I'm saying in this particular scenario, I'm not an idiot. But if you're working in a smaller business, or if you're working solo, I would recommend not giving Figma your money. That's all I'm saying. Plus, Sketch has perpetual license again now, so you don't have to pay a subscription anymore. It's $120, I think it is, and then you get that's every year if you want to pay for the updates, or if you stop paying for the updates, you keep the version you've got. So I'm running a trial of the latest one, but my old Sketch license still works, and the version of Sketch that runs that license works just fine. And where Sketch is like a fairly mature tool, in fact, another observation from Sketch so far is the actual experience of drawing, with the exception of the lack of node networks, which I don't actually like. The whole thing where you can, and you could choose to branch off here, which is not a thing I love in Figma. That's also why drawing in Figma, man. Figma sucks for drawing. But the actual drawing, the canvas experience of Sketch is actually kind of better. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of better. There's some things that's missing. I'm not saying this is a better tool. At no point am I saying this is better. I'm saying this is still a very good tool, which in some ways is better. In a lot of other ways, it's worse. But what you get in exchange is less money, right? You have better performance. You have privacy and ownership over you. I mean, if Sketch decide tomorrow they're going to bring out some LLM based AI bollocks, then I'm out. I'm going to go to Penpot. And the reason why I'm using Sketch instead of Penpot is Penpot's just not ready. It's still quite rudimentary. Things like, you might bemoan the idea that you don't have. I'm sorry about this length and waffliness of this video, but whereas Sketch doesn't have things like variants, it's kind of fine. You can just have duplicates. And like, let's say if I've got like, let's just make a pretend. Let's go around that. Let's make a pretend button. Let's go and let's make this one. I don't know. Let's make it red, and then we'll just change the radius on it. And this is our cancel state. Let's get rid of that border, and then we'll make that into a component. Right, there we go. And we'll call this one button / no. There we go, great. And then we'll make another one. We'll make this one green. There we go, beautiful. Look at that, it's lovely. And then we do button / yes. And you can still work in terms of press C. I missed this as well. You can do this, and you can still go into here, and you can say, well, there we go. And you can work with variants. You can work with you can still swap out instances, and it works. It works. You can swap out nested instances as well. So it's fine. It's not perfect. it works. It's fine. So it's delete all that. Bang. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Basically, the TLDR of this video is not only is everyone losing their minds a couple of weeks ago about what Adobe did, Figma's just done exactly the same. The difference being they have been more transparent about it, but also it's a statement of intent. That's the real thing here, is with the release of their more recent tools, how much the core experience of Figma, elements of it are kind of atrophied. It happens. Tools get mature. But the statement of, at least how I see it, the statement of intent is here basically Figma saying, you core market person are not who we care about. In the same way Adobe, you core market person is not who they care about because they've saturated that market. They've had a stranglehold in the creative market for 2 decades at this point. Adobe want to sell software to everyone, layman, any users. They want simplified tools. The reason why they want Figma, it's a larger market. They don't necessarily even need the money to corner the UX market in terms of the amount of people using creative tools nowadays. It's such a small slice of the pie. And Figma's the same now. They've saturated the market. Sketch, or previously Bohemian Coding, what they were before the name of the company, they had a stranglehold of this market for a good 5 years, 6 years before Figma came along. But Figma, I think, have probably long since saturated the UX and product design market, and they have already successfully moved over into broader markets, and they want to now continue to consume other parts of that product building process, and also general comms process with the things like slides and FigJam. Means that they want you to do more stuff in Figma. It's not just for you, and the side effect of that is to empower that much larger market. For every UX person, there's someone else in the office part of that process, and there's 5 of them for each one of you. And Figma want them to be on their platform, and they want them to have more direct control, because let's face it, designers, they're annoying, right? We're really annoying. We're just annoying to work with, and this isn't a new thing. I remember back when I was a graphic designer, and the thing that Canva's done so successfully as well is that democratization. And I'm not saying it's all bad, and I'm not saying necessarily that in some ways other people should be involved in the process. They are, and increasingly the trend has moved towards getting people from outside the traditional design process involved in that process. I don't think that's all bad. But what I do think is bad, when it comes to the very heart of what you do, having exposure of your work via things like Figma has been fantastic. Being able to show people around files, being able to have them export their own things, leave comments directly, that's all incredibly useful. The minute when you have people outside that process just doing your job and having the tool that you use day in, day out under the guise of utilities for you to make you more effective, or make your day a little bit quicker, is really just a subterfuge. It's a backdoor to allow laymen to spend more time doing parts of your job. To support a company like that is to make yourself obsolete ultimately, or to hasten your own obsolescence, and is my base opinion, and that's why I won't support them any further. So take from this what you will. I'm not trying to sound like a doomy person. I think it's not like, oh my, the market's in a weird place. There's a lot of drivers, and this certainly doesn't help. But it certainly doesn't help. So I'm out. Anyway, have a lovely day, and that's the end of this video. And yeah, bye.